Hi, I'm Christelle from Diabetes Strong. In this video, I'll be going over my daily blood sugar levels and insulin doses. I've been living with type 1 diabetes since 1997, and I do want to point out that every day does not look the same for me, both when it comes to what I eat and how much insulin I take. But when I posted a video about what I eat in a day, a lot of you guys reached out and asked me to also include how much insulin I injected that day and how my blood sugar levels fluctuated. So let me show you. But before we dive in, please remember that this is just one day in my life. Days look different, and I'm not telling you or even suggesting how you should manage your diabetes. How much insulin you need for meals and corrections is most likely different from what I need. So be safe, and please discuss any changes to your diabetes management with your medical team. And here you see my blood sugars for the full 24 hours of Sunday, May 1st. And what you see here is a Dexcom CGM graph. That stands for Continuous Glucose Monitoring. And that's a device I wear that allows me to see my blood sugars 24/7. What you see here is you see the orange line. The orange line is 180 milligrams per deciliter. That's 10 millimole per liter. The lower line, you see the red line, is 70 milligrams per deciliter. That's 3.9 millimole per liter. As you can see, my blood sugars are fairly stable up until around 6 a.m. in the morning. And here you see the dawn phenomenon kicking in. That's basically my body releasing glucose into the bloodstream. So at that point, I was sleeping. It was a Sunday. I slept in. So I didn't act on that until 8:20 a.m. in the morning. And at that point, my blood sugars already almost reached 180 milligrams per deciliter. I use a correction factor of 50, meaning that based on experience, I know that 1 unit of rapid-acting insulin lowers my blood sugars about 50 milligrams per deciliter. So based on that, I injected 1.5 units of rapid-acting insulin, and as you can see, it came down pretty nicely. Now let's look at the meals. So this was a lazy Sunday, so breakfast ended up not being until 11:30 a.m. And that day, it was an omelet and an English muffin. At that point, my blood sugars were 86, and there was 28 grams of carbs in that whole meal, so I injected 3 units of rapid-acting insulin. I did not plan on pre-bolusing for this meal, so that means taking my insulin 15, maybe even 20 minutes before the meal. I did not plan on doing that because my blood sugar was 86 milligrams per deciliter, and I was planning on going to the gym. So I injected my insulin at 11:30 and was planning on eating, but I got distracted recording that video about what I eat in a day. So I ended up not eating until 12:15. And this is a great example of insulin and meal timing, because as you can see, I kind of went low. Again, that's because I ended up bolusing, so taking my rapid-acting insulin 45 minutes before I actually ended up eating. I ended up taking 1 glucose tab and eating my meal, and that kind of took care of that. I took 3 units of insulin for 28 grams of carbs because I use a carb ratio of 1:10. That means that I assume that 1 unit of rapid-acting insulin will cover 10 grams of carbohydrates. So 1:10. In the past, I've used different carb ratios for different meals. So for example, maybe a 8 for breakfast and a 12 for dinner. But currently I find that a 1:10 works for pretty much all my meals. After breakfast, I went to the gym and I did 45 minutes of resistance training and 40 minutes of cardio. And as you can see in the graph, my blood sugars stayed completely flat. That is unusual. Usually I will see some level of movement in my blood sugars when I exercise, but this day I did not. After my workout, I had a cup of coffee with collagen protein, and I did not inject any insulin for that. I do sometimes, as coffee as well as protein can impact my blood sugars. But it's a bit of a judgment call, so I will look at where my blood sugar is at, am I dropping, and how much insulin do I have on board. But this day, again, I chose not to inject any insulin, and as you can see, my blood sugar stayed fairly flat at 110 to 120 milligrams per deciliter up until lunch. So for that day, it was the right call. Then I had a large late lunch around 4:30 p.m. Yes, I know that's a weird time to have lunch, but since I had a late start, my meals kind of got pushed out a bit. So at that point, my blood sugar was 114 milligrams per deciliter, and the complete meal had 27 grams of carbs, total carbs. However, 6 of that was fibers, so I subtracted that, got down to a net carb count of 21. And given I use a 1:10 carb ratio, I injected 2 units of insulin for that whole meal. And I did that before I started preparing my meal. So that means that I had a pre-bolus of about 10 minutes. I usually take 2 units to 2.5 units for that type of lunch. It kind of depends on how much protein I add. And that day I should clearly have taken 2.5 and not just 2 units, because as you can see, I'm slowly trending upwards after lunch. And 90 minutes after lunch, I wanted a snack. And at that point, I was 143 milligrams per deciliter. So 143 milligrams per deciliter is not a horrible blood sugar in any way, but I aim for me to be back in the 80 to 120 milligrams per deciliter 90 minutes after a meal. I'd say the major variables for me when deciding between like 2 or 2.5 units for a meal like my lunch is, as I said, the protein, as large amount of proteins can also impact blood sugars, and how much insulin I have on board, so my IOB, as well as whether or not I exercised. But even knowing these variables doesn't necessarily mean I get it right every time. So at 6 p.m. I decided to have a little snack, and at that point my blood sugar was 143 milligrams per deciliter. I decided to have a kind bar and a cup of coffee. So the kind bar has 10 grams of carbohydrates, and giving my carb ratio is 1:10, that is 1 unit. The coffee is a bit of an unknown for me. It's a bit of a unknown variable in the sense that sometimes coffee will raise my blood sugars, sometimes it will not. So that day I decided to not inject any insulin, decided to not bolus for the coffee. However, since I was a little higher, my blood sugar was a little higher than I wanted it to be, I did include half a unit of correction. So that means 1.5 units in total, and the goal was then to try and get my blood sugars down closer to 100 milligrams per deciliter. I did not succeed in getting my blood sugars down to 100 before dinner. So at 8:30 p.m., it was time for dinner. My blood sugar was 148 milligrams per deciliter. This is reality. I'm just showing you what happened that day, and I don't always succeed in getting my blood sugars to the levels I want to. Anyway, 148 milligrams per deciliter is still not horrendous. It's just not where I wanted it. I did not do any further corrections between that snack at 6 p.m. and dinner at 8:30. The reason for that is that I generally wait 1.5 hours to 2 hours after injecting insulin for a meal before I do any corrections. The reason for that is that injected insulin, rapid-acting insulin, takes time to work. And if I start stacking between meals too aggressively, I run the risk of going low. And I don't want that, so that's why I wait at least that 1.5 hours to 2 hours. Okay, so blood sugars were 148 milligrams per deciliter before dinner, and I had a tuna melt on low-carb toast. And that was a total carb of 18, subtract fiber, get to a carb count of 15 net carbs. So that's what I bolused for, that's what I dosed for. I'm not sure why I didn't do a correction, but I didn't. So I only took 1.5 units for that whole meal. And again, I took the dose when I started to prepare the meal, which means that my pre-bolus time was about 10 to 20 minutes before the meal. And this was the second meal in a row where I clearly took a little bit too little insulin, about half a unit, I'll think. So my blood sugars slowly climbed up until 9:30 by like 34 milligrams per deciliter and topped out at around 179 milligrams per deciliter. At this point, I was irritated. Get clear, it's irritating. It's annoying when your blood sugars are just like slowly climbing. I don't beat myself up about it. I don't see it as failure, but I do get irritated. So for my evening snack there at 9:30 p.m., I had a low-carb yogurt and some almonds, so that net carbs were only 3 grams, so hardly anything. But because I'm now still trending upwards, I'm at 179, I decided to inject 1.5 units of rapid-acting insulin. And the good news is that that did take me down overnight, and I woke up with a blood sugar of 82 milligrams per deciliter. It was perfect for me, so that did make me happy. But I want to showcase here that, I know what to do, but still there's going to be days where I don't get it quite right. None of these blood sugars are horrendous. It's just slightly outside of the range that I want to be in, and yes, I do get irritated. And that is what my blood sugars look like and how much insulin I took that specific day. Remember, not every day is going to look the same. However, generally I do find that when I eat like this, when I eat a varied diet, I don't see any crazy blood sugar spikes. And yes, I did see my blood sugars trend up during the afternoon, but if you look at the whole day, let's just look at my stats here. You can see my average blood sugar is 122 milligrams per deciliter. My time in range, meaning how much time I spent between 70 and 180, was 92%. So that's still a pretty darn good day from a blood sugar perspective, right? So I think that's one of those really good examples of it's really beneficial for us to look at the broader strokes and not dial in and only focus on individual instances throughout the day. Because overall, this was a good day for me. So thank you for following along, checking in on my blood sugars and my insulin levels throughout the day. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please give it a like below and leave me a comment. Also, if you find my content helpful, remember to subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications. That is that little bell. That way you'll be informed whenever I post new content. Thank you so much for watching.